Hello y'all, this is Kaiserredux, a mod for Hearts of Iron 4 that acts as an unofficial standalone expansion for Kaiserreich. Kaiserreich itself is a mod set in a timeline where the Central Powers won World War I. With that introduction out of the way, this video is going to act as part 1 of a Honduras Israel path playthrough. We have begun, and let's go to our national overview here, and here we can see that we have 4 national spirits, and they are Monroe Doctrine, Peasant Republic, December Revolution, and Great Purge. And besides all of that, the ruling ideology of Honduras is authoritarian democracy of the oligarchism variety. And now let's move on to our military, where we have 2 divisions in the army, 2 divisions, that's it, and no navy, and 5 airplanes for our air force, and that is the fighters for the FAH. So that's that. Now we have some research slots available. Let's go ahead and do basic machine tools, get started there, as well as construction 1, just some essential opening stuff to research. And now in the focus tree, we're going to do state of the army. We're currently still suffering the effect of last year's army purge. If we wish to get our army back on its feet, we shall need to start assessing the status of the army. And from this focus, once it's complete in 49 days, we'll get an event called State of the Army. Alright then. And let's take our 2 divisions here and give them a commander. And do we have a general? Do we have any? Yeah, we have a few generals and we have 1 field marshal. So 4 generals and one field marshal. That is what Honduras has. We have 1 civilian factory. Start building another one in our capital of Tegucigalpa. I can't pronounce that. Tegucigalpa, and free military factory. We have just 1 military factory. Let's put it to Mauser production. Infantry equipment, basically decisions available. Don't worry about that. Insufficient resources. No division basic training. Let's change that. We need at least 1 new division. And our infantry division, in terms of its template, has a combat width of 6, and it consists of just 3 infantry battalions. So not ideal for fighting against major powers, but I don't expect us to deal with that. In fact, what I do expect for Honduras, we have an event here explaining the background of the country, so let me read that. The original Banana Republic, having come under the domination of various U.S. fruit companies that turned the nation into an economic enclave, Honduras came to a breaking point in 1933. A peasant uprising stormed the capital and led to the death of the sitting president. But even after this catastrophe, the government established in the aftermath of the revolution became dominated once more by U.S. interests and a clique of intelligentista. Now what remains of Honduras' apparatus of state is a mess, purged of the centers and relying on military force to keep the railways to the ports open. So it's not much, but it's home. And judging from that, it seems that Honduras is a military junta with a democratic facade. I don't really know how to describe it. And let's take our 2 divisions here and move them to the border of El Salvador. And what I was saying earlier is that I expect our country to ultimately come into conflict with our neighbors, be it Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, because also maybe Costa Rica, because usually these countries, at least Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala, will all try to unite Central America and form 1 large Central American state. And that is something we will have to be aware of and be on the lookout for all the time. And State of the Army is halfway done, I think. Well, it's not halfway done. It has some way to go, but it's going to get there soon. And a Totalist Charter was just announced in some world news event, and Edward VIII is crowned as King of Great Britain. And really, honestly, for Honduras to have the path we wanted to go down, we're going to have to wait for the Second American Civil War, which will be, let me think here, I believe 1937 is when that happens, typically, because we need the end of the Monroe Doctrine, which we're dealing with right now. And of course the Monroe Doctrine is enacted by the USA. It has caused our nation to lack a significant military force or the ability to go to a war with any other American countries in general. While this ensures the safety of our country, it severely limits the idea of expansion. Black Monday has come, and a great Berlin stock market crash has occurred. Sorelians are elected in France, and that is in the commune of France. Afghanistan is fighting the Mini New Delhi. But yeah, we had to wait for the Monroe Doctrine to effectively end when the USA falls into chaos at some point in time. And so the Berlin stock market crash, Black Monday hit. That's an economic disaster for most of the world. I guess we're not really affected by that. And State of the Army is nearly done. Come on, one more day. State of the Army is complete, so let's read this event here. And it says, the Honduran Army is a small one and currently suffers from a severe lack of competent leadership due to the purges of American connected officers that have occurred. There are two major competing schools of thought seeking to remedy this deficiency. One proposes professionalizing the Army into a small and elite force that is very selective, while the other espouses a large army focused entirely on defense rather than offensive operations outside of Honduras. Point the loud in at the other guy. Yeah, so in our focus tree now, we can now pick professional army or an irregular army. And so the difference is here is that irregular army will give us a cost reduction for the mass assault doctrine. Meanwhile, professional army will give us a cost reduction for superior firepower doctrine and grand battle plan doctrine. And let's go with the professional army. A professional army will stand supreme in Central America. We cannot afford to waste huge amounts of manpower like Guatemala or El Salvador, so we will have to rely on quality over quantity, and we're going to try and go down the path of superior firepower, but we'll need the industry to accomplish that. And over in China, there's some fighting going on. The Shandong cliques fighting the League of Eight Provinces or something like that, and I think they're having some the situation there is getting out of hand. And meanwhile, with all that going on, Iceland, in other news, has declared its independence from Denmark. They were the Kingdom of Iceland and not so much anymore. They have broken free, even though they still are guaranteed by Denmark, so they haven't completely severed diplomatic relations with the Danish just yet. And professional army will take about 50 days to be completed, and all we can do until then is wait and continue on our way of doing military focuses. I don't think we have anything that will help us out with our economy right now. Yeah, we don't really have anything for that at this moment in time. We just have stuff relating to our military, be it the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. And personally, I'm just going to try and aim to get as many focuses done relating to the military, relating to the Army as possible, because that is the most important branch for us. And final ratification of the Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras border treaty. We have been working towards establishing the definitive borders between us, Guatemala, and El Salvador for years now. Due to the lack of natural barriers, our borders have shifted significantly before, but El Salvador has proposed a final draft for the common border treaty, which shall be established in the Rio Frio section at the Monte Cristo Hill. What shall I do? Accept the treaty or reject it? I mean, let's accept it to get some political power, because I need that. Also, I think El Salvador is going to like us more by going with that option. And if we had declined it, we would have lost political power, and El Salvador would have lowered their opinion of us. Maybe Guatemala as well, but I'm not entirely sure. But at least we have more political power now, so that's always a good thing, and Hearts of Iron 4. And I really wish I could do something about this, about the insufficient resources, but I can't at this moment in time, since I only have one civilian factory being used for the production of buildings, so it's just something I'm going to have to deal with. And there's a democratic cabinet in national France, so it seems there's going to be democracy in the French national state. Meanwhile, in the commune of France, the Sorelians are in charge, and they're kind of like national syndicalists or something. I don't know. I can't really describe what they are, but they're led by Georges Follot, whatever his name is, this guy here. They're very militaristic, if I remember right. And there's some desertions in the army. Oh boy, let me read that. Let me get rid of that pop-up there. But now let's read this. Desertions in the army. For a long time now, we have relied on military force to protect the narrow railways connecting plantations to ports in order to keep our economy afloat. However, with the ongoing economic crisis and political discontent, the loyalty of the army has become uncertain, with hundreds of men quitting their post to join up with one militia or another. They'll come back when they're hungry, and from this event, we'll lose 1,000 manpower, and authoritarian democracy will lose popularity, just 10% popularity, which is honestly pretty bad, but we'll be fine for now. It seems like things are getting somewhat unstable in the country. That's a little worrying, but what can you do? And some peace treaty has occurred, and besides that, it is April 1936 now, so we're just progressing along quite nicely here, reading events as they pop up and such. And professional army is done. Let's complete standardized equipment now. Let me read the focus. We don't possess a standard rifle, and we're currently mostly using leftovers that Spain was so kind to allow us to buy on the cheap a few years ago. We need to change that, so we shall start rifle trials to adopt one model as standard. And from this focus, we'll get a national spirit called standardized equipment, which will grant us Poland false syndicalism. Okay, but anyway, infantry equipment reliability will go up, recruitable population factor will go down, division attack will go up, and so will division defense. So we are focusing highly on quality compared to quantity. And the first international congress has occurred, electoral gridlock in Britain, and so here is syndicalist Poland. They'll probably end up joining the Fourth International, which is the faction, well, the Third International, not the Fourth, although that is a potential faction in this mob. But anyway, the Third International is a faction led by France and the Union of Britain. A railway bombing has occurred, so let's read about that. Disaster struck early this morning as a unit of deserters, in protest of the council's policy, bombed the section of railway they used to guard. Reports have already arrived of heists on the now stopped trains. Round up some loyalists and get after them. And from this, well, some infrastructure will take damage in San Pedro Sula, and the popularity of authoritarian democracy will go down. So the authoritarian Democrat government is not looking too great. Well, authoritarian Democrat would be the best word I can use, the best term to use to describe the government, ideology-wise. But yeah, things are not going well for them. And the PLSR wins the Russian election. I think that's like some kind of socialist party, I believe. Let me read here. So yeah, it is some kind of, they're syndicalist, anarcho-syndicalist to be more accurate. And it's the party of left socialist revolutionaries. Interesting. That's all I can say there. And Qing declared war on the left Kuomintang in China, so fighting is going on there. And we're watching El Salvador. They have more divisions than we do. I just noticed that. We gotta change that. I need more guns. Malta secures independence. Alright. Can any of these focuses give me factories? I just need factories. Okay, I need to probably complete something else then. White Ruthenia falls to syndicalism. The German Empire, the Reichspakt is really, their Eastern European allies definitely are not, they're not really, okay, so they still kept the king. Wait, oh, whatever, forget it. But let's now complete the technology, well, start researching concentrated industry 1. And besides that, let's research, complete the focus, organized chain of command. So let me read this here. Our current chain of command is murky and ineffective at best, especially in the wake Pius XII is elected as a new pope. But anyway, back on topic, especially in the wake of our army purges. A restructuring is in order to provide clear command hierarchy and allow our soldiers to regroup under a different commanding officer. And from this we'll get 10 army experience and a national spirit called professional officers, which will grant us higher division organization, less recruitable population, and a higher division recovery rate. Alright then. And skirmishes with deserters, oh boy. Perhaps unsurprisingly, when they deserted, the soldiers kept their guns. That is very shocking indeed. The loyalists we sent to track down and arrest railway bombers have been fired upon, and a running skirmish is now occurring north of the capital. Well, at least it can't get any worse, or possibly could. I don't know. Yeah, the deserters should have been stripped of their guns, because that is bad. That is kind of bad, having roaming bands of militia going around the country armed with weapons. That is concerning indeed. And Manuel Carles assumed full control of Argentina. Down here, is that right? Yes, it is. And organized chain of command is about more than halfway done at this point. Good. After this, we'll probably do, say, military infrastructure. There's a coup d'etat in Siam. That is going on. And how's our division here going? Good. It's going to be deployed soon. Let's have an infinite queue of divisions to be made. And do I add another... Okay, no, I was going to add another infantry battalion to my divisions, but it doesn't seem worth it. And the fall of the Kingdom of Finland has occurred, so let me go check that out over in Europe. So Finland is now a what? I didn't read that event too well. It's a national populist state. Interesting. Very interesting. So no more kingdom there. And with all that said, at this point I think I'm going to end what is part 1 of my Honduras Israel path playthrough and Kaiserredux here. If you enjoyed this mod, you can check it out in the video description. The link to it is there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe.